money out of politics.
So what do you think about our new board president?
Well,
What's going to happen?
I think that John Avalos was talking about House of Cards before the board meeting went down, and the deal was cut. This was all done. I mean, I sat there all afternoon, sitting through a long and actually fascinating hearing, a conditional use hearing about the building on Telegraph Hill. Everybody else was thinking, oh God, why didn't you? I actually found this stuff interesting because I'm weird. But by the time it came to the vote, around the time I got here, around 4:07, basically everyone agreed that the deal had been cut. The backroom meetings, the talk, it was very clear that, number one, they were going to do this when David Campos wasn't there. That was David Chu's legacy. That's what he wanted. He wanted to make sure that David Campos was not allowed to be included in the vote for the next board president. Right? Then it became very clear very quickly that there weren't more than a couple of votes to put this off until Campos was back. There's no rush, by the way. The city would have survived if David Chu was board president for 2 more weeks and we did this the first week in December. Right? It wouldn't be the end of the world. But no, they had to make sure that this was done when Campos wasn't there, so they wouldn't have that one more vote. And then there wasn't enough votes. When it became clear that there were only like 2 or 3 votes to delay, even to delay the meeting, it was clear that there were nowhere near enough votes to elect anybody progressive who was supervisor president. So the original play in the middle of the afternoon was going to be, let's get a caretaker. Maybe we can go out there and say, all right, let's get Norman Yee to be board president and promise he won't run again next year. And Norman was good with that. He would have been happy to just sit there for, for either the 3 or 4 meetings and then...
We did that with the mayor.
Right, we did it. I honestly think Norman would be in a different situation than the mayor, but that was it, let's get a caretaker. Then of course the problem is, we did that with the mayor and it didn't work out right. I think Katie Tang was taken as a compromise in part because people thought, well, maybe she'll kind of be a caretaker. Maybe she'll just do this for a few weeks, and when we have a new board in place, Campos will be back, and there'll be at least 1 new supervisor. That could be 2 different votes. Well, you only need 6. 2 is a significant number. Maybe Katie Tang is just going to be a short-termer, and Edwin was going to be a short-termer too. Right? He was going to only fill, and he promised. I sat in his office, and he said to me, I will never run for mayor of San Francisco. He said, the only way I would ever run in an election for mayor of San Francisco is if all 11 members of the board of supervisors asked me to. And since half of them were running against him, that was never going to happen. Right? So, I don't know. It's sad because it just shows how, for all David Chu was talking about civility, how willing they are to stab somebody in the back because Campos was out of town and just go right ahead and do this. And, it matters because not only does Katie Tang now appoint board committees, and I'm sure there was some talk, and I'm sure this was unanimous. No one else was nominated, by the way. Wiener nominated Tang, and no one else nominated anybody. I think London Breed told me towards the end of the meeting she didn't want it. She didn't want to be board president. So they kind of picked Katie Tang as someone who maybe everyone would agree on, and maybe people thought she'd be a short-termer. I'm sure there was some talk about what committee she's going to appoint. The problem is the president of the board also appoints planning commissioners and police commissioners. And that's a big deal. I mean, the only reason we've had any good planning commissioners in San Francisco is because we've had board of supervisors presidents who have appointed some decent ones. The mayor's never appointed any good planning commissioners. So that's going to be a scary thing. So now the question is, okay, we got Katie Tang in there. She is not board president for life, like David Chu like us. She is not board president beyond the first meeting in January, when there will be at least 2 different votes. So let's start thinking now about who might be the next board president for the next 2 years who isn't Katie Tang. Not that I have anything personal against Katie Tang. I think she's a very nice person and an honest person. Her politics are very different from anyone in this room. She is a very conservative person politically. Not that that's evil, I just think it's wrong. but she will not appoint progressive planning commissioners. She will not put John Avalos in charge of the budget committee. Right? So we're going to have a challenge here. And I think the challenge is to not say, again, this was a defeat. But it was a defeat because we were stabbed in the back and there was backroom trickery going on. And let's gather ourselves up and see if we can find 6 votes for somebody in January.
And do you have a sense of who might be appointed to replace David Chu?
Well, this is a really interesting thing. I'm writing about it. It's one of my favorite topics in the world right now. The administration of Ed Lee is deeply divided right now. Right? The old Ed Lee came out of Chinatown, out of CCDC, out of the Gordon Chin Rose Pack axis. Gordon, I like a lot. Rose, I don't agree with so much. But nevertheless, they were very involved in getting Ed Lee elected. And that part of that nonprofit, community-based organization, Chinatown thing, was a big part of his base when he ran the first time. Right? Now, he is pushing them to the side in favor of Ron Conway. And everyone knows this is going on. If you talk to Rose Pack, she will say things about Ron Conway that you don't want to hear repeated in a good, nice organization like this one. She doesn't like Ron Conway. The CCDC folks don't like Ron Conway. They don't like the new tech people who are now getting all of the mayor's attention and have taken over, essentially, control of policy in the mayor's office. So, if the mayor appoints Cindy Wu to that District 3 seat, it will be a sign that there is still some semblance of the old Ed Lee, Chinatown, Rose Pack coalition pushing it. If he rejects it and appoints somebody that Ron Conway and the real estate people like, those folks will start to abandon him to Rose because they will be unhappy. Right? Rose is already really unhappy. She's very unhappy with the go. She doesn't like, she feels like, how Rose Pack is, she's not doing this for any political principle. She likes to be the insider. And she's been kind of pushed out a little bit, out of all these tech people are moving in. So that's really the test right now. It will be a test not only of whether we get a good supervisor or not, but it'll be a test of how fractured the administration and the power structure behind Ed Lee is going to be going into an election. If he appoints Cindy Wu, Ron Conway will be really pissed because he doesn't like Cindy Wu because she didn't drink the Kool-Aid on Airbnb. Right? She wasn't completely against him on Airbnb, but she wasn't the Airbnb cheerleader on the planning commission. She actually raised questions. So that's not okay in Ron Conway's universe. You don't ask questions, you do fall. And so that's the very interesting question. And I think that the decision on the District 3 supervisor is going to say a whole lot about where this mayoral administration is right now and how together it can be moving forward into the election.
So basically, Ed Lee has to decide who he's going to piss off.
Right.
Conway or Rose Pack.
Right. He has to decide, is he going to continue to dance with the ones that brought him? That's, the CCDC Rose Pack folks. Or is he going to dance with the people who are giving him all of his money right now? And who he's in love with because he's in love with Pack. So which side of Ed Lee are we going to see? And he's going to have to decide in the next month. And there's a lot of talk, maybe he can find someone in between, but that's going to be real tough. That's going to be real tough. We hadn't had the Mercury vote. And if David Campos hadn't taken what I honestly, in my heart, believe was what he thought was a vote of conscience at the time. David Campos. Right? So, and, David, I actually think that voting a way that showed your principles and your courage is something that should be encouraged, even if you disagree with the vote. And I think that the convenient thing for David Campos to have done would have been to just say, it doesn't really matter, sheriff, whatever, Vicky Hennessy's not that bad, whatever, we'll just throw Ross under the bus. He didn't because he actually thought that what was happening was wrong. Right? Nevertheless, he got clobbered. And that may have very well have been a factor in his loss. I mean, it was definitely a factor in his loss, whether it was decisive or not, it was definitely a factor. So now, the sheriff is going to run for re-election. And he's going to be on the ballot, and he's going to be going around asking people for their endorsements. And the challenge for all of us is, this is not going to be about whether Ross Mercury is doing a good job as sheriff. Which, from what I can tell, he is. I mean, I've actually, because I'm crazy, I've actually spent some time in the county jails. And I've actually gone around and talked to prisoners, and I've actually tried to look at the policies of the sheriff's office completely separate from whatever you think about the person who's in charge. What is it like? How does that trickle down to what it's like being in confinement in the county sheriff's office and in the county jail? By that standard, you could say that Ross Mercury is doing a good job. Right? He's running things relatively well. One little problem in San Francisco general aside. Right? But that will not be what this is about. This will all be about domestic violence, and Ron Conway will be in there with $5 million, if necessary, to attack any candidate for mayor who dares to endorse, shake hands with, or be seen in the presence of Ross Mercury. And it will be a challenge for all of us. What does the Mill Club do? Do you encourage him not to run? That's going to go nowhere. I'm sure he's convinced that he's doing a good job and he should run for re-election. That's not Really though, Raphael, I think you identified that's not the issue. I have always said that the people I respect most in progressive politics are the people who are able to say, whether they're elected to office or not, particularly people who are elected to office, who are willing to say it's not just about me. That the movement and moving what we do forward is bigger than having me in this particular office. And those people are rare. But the people who say, you know what, maybe this time I shouldn't run so that this person can, because this person is more likely to get elected, and we both agree on everything, and this person will do a better job moving the progressive agenda forward than I would, even though I would love to have the fancy office with my name on the door. Maybe it's more important than me. Those people are rare. Honestly, I don't think Ross Bergering is one of them. I think he's going to run for re-election, and I think all of us are going to have to deal with whether we come out and say, the guy has done a good job in the job that he was elected to. He has been effective as a progressive sheriff, and therefore he should be re-elected. Or whether we're going to make a strategic political decision and say, I can't be associated with this guy because it's going to cost us X, Y, and Z. It's going to be one of the toughest things that we deal with this year. And if you know the answer, tell me.
And just to add from a criminal justice reform perspective, because this is some of the stuff that I work on with my day job, one of the challenges around Ross has been his ongoing support for rebuilding the jail.
Yeah.
Right, and so there's been a progressive organizing movement. San Francisco's jail population is the lowest that it's been since the 1970s right now. And we've got these controllers reports that are coming in at lower and lower numbers. We may not actually need a new jail. We may be able to invest those resources elsewhere in the community and help address some of the causes of why people end up in jail. Yeah. And so, you know, Ross is the sheriff. He heads up the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department runs the jail. So he's got every reason to support building a larger jail. That's more staff. That's, you know, everything. And that's what he has done. He's been willing to back down the numbers somewhat, but he's still supporting that. And that's, you know, to me, from a progressive criminal justice reform perspective, figuring out how in that conversation about the campaign for sheriff, can we raise, like, what is the criminal justice system? What is the jail system that San Francisco wants and needs and deserves? And it may not be the one that either of the sheriff's candidates are going to be pushing for. So I think there's a way to raise some critique of the job that the sheriff is doing and the vision that the sheriff has for San Francisco's jails that may not match what the Mill Club and many of our allies think.
To ignore their oath of office as an attorney and as an elected official and just vote on a political basis. And it's even worse because they knew that if there weren't the votes to reinstate him, the court would have reinstated him under the Mazzola case. That was where George Moscone fired Larry Mazzola because he was picketing the airport while sitting in the airport commission, and the court said no, that has nothing to do with his official duties as an airport commissioner. It's important for people to understand that.
I think that the four cast the right vote. And I think that what's happened to the four over the last 2 or 3 years, or whatever, however long it's been, 3 years, I guess, has been shameful and awful. And I think the fact that we don't have a progressive supervisor just apply because of that, in some ways because that vote is horrendous. I think the fact that I think we don't have the more progressive assembly person, I think because of that vote is horrible. But it just seems to me that we don't win. We don't get to 50-something% in this city without winning. I just don't think it happens for progressives. And I just have had too many experiences, including on the Accomplice campaign, knocking on doors in Bernal Heights and having a lesbian woman answer the door. She's like in her probably late 20s, early 30s. She knows nothing about David Campos except for David Campos. And she was going to vote for David Shute president. And I think that was perpetuated across the city.
It was not all attacks that they use against us are effective. This one wasn't. It wasn't. You haven't just talked yet.
Well, first, the D5 election was a mess on so many different levels.
Yes.
That I don't know how much it had to do with remembering anybody the other day. But what I have been thinking about is
should be in front of every fucking camera. Because she can win the election for him if he shuts his mouth. And when people get to know her, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, their relationship survived this terrible ordeal. And that is the outcome that we should hope for in a domestic violence situation. We're not hoping that every man is locked in prison and is deprives his child of a father.
It seems to me that when people have the facts about something, misleading and smear campaign flowers aren't really going to work about the situation in the church. I was surprised at the campus campaign doing phone banking, precinct walking. I even did some presentations at some senior centers where the issue with the sheriff came up and how people didn't know really what had gone on, just what they had heard. And time again, I would have to explain. They didn't even know that 2 women supervisors had voted for David Campos. And I guess I was surprised that, like I said, people didn't have the facts. Because if they had, I don't think those flyers, whatever they mailed, would have had the effect that they did.
We have a problem with the city with communication, and it starts with having a daily newspaper that tends to cover things in a superficial and sensationalistic fashion, and not take the time and energy to get to the bottom of it. It's a challenge for all of us. That's why I started 48 Plus. Thank you all for listening.